The California sun hammered down on Naval Special Warfare Command like a physical weight, turning the asphalt into shimmering mirrors of heat. Captain Grace Thornton stepped out of the government sedan, her Marine Corps dress uniform crisp despite the 100-degree afternoon, ribbons gleaming across her chest. The expert rifle marksmanship badge caught the light. 3 gold wreaths surrounded it, the highest designation the Corps awarded. She'd earned every one of them. Grace adjusted her cover and shouldered her rifle case. The worn green canvas was older than she was, older than most of the men watching her from across the parking lot. Inside that case lay a piece of history, a piece of her father, a piece of a war that had ended before she was born, but had shaped everything she'd become. Navy SEALs clustered near the equipment shed. Their conversations died as she approached. Some crossed their arms. Others exchanged glances that said everything their words didn't. A few didn't even try to hide their skepticism. Grace had expected this. She'd been the first woman in every shooting competition she'd ever entered since joining the Marines 7 years ago. The doubt, the whispered comments, the barely concealed hostility masquerading as concern. It was old news. Background noise she'd learned to tune out like static. But this was different. This wasn't a local competition or even a Marine Corps championship. This was the Naval Special Warfare Command Advanced Sniper Competition, an invitation-only event where America's most elite marksmen gathered to prove who was deadliest, who was best, who deserved to be called a warrior in a world where that word had lost its meaning. And she was the first woman who'd ever qualified to attend. Grace walked toward the main building. Every step felt deliberate, measured, like walking through water that didn't want her to pass. She could feel their eyes tracking her movement, analyzing, judging, waiting for her to fail before she'd even fired a shot. A voice cut through the tension. "Captain Thornton." Grace turned. A mountain of a man approached from the command post. Master Chief Jack Reeves was a legend in special operations circles. 68 years old, but built like he'd been carved from California granite. Silver beard trimmed with military precision. Eyes that had seen too much combat in too many places. The Navy Cross ribbon sat prominently on his khaki uniform alongside a cluster of other decorations that told stories most men couldn't bear to hear. Vietnam, multiple tours, Hue City, Khe Sanh, places where young men went to become old or become ghosts. Grace snapped a salute. Reeves returned it with the casual precision of someone who'd performed the gesture 10,000 times. "Master Chief." Reeves studied her face, not the way the others had looked at her. This was different. He was searching for something, some quality that couldn't be measured by gender or politics or the bureaucratic mandates that had brought her here. "Your father and I served together." The words hit Grace like a physical blow. Her father had never mentioned this man's name, never talked about specific people from Vietnam beyond generalities. The war had been something he'd carried in silence, a weight that had shaped him but never broken him. "Sir," he never mentioned. The best ones never do. Reeves's weathered face remained impassive. Marines taught him to shoot. Vietnam taught him to survive. What did he teach you? Grace met his eyes. No flinching, no hesitation. That fundamentals outlast fashion, sir. The corner of Reeves's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, something harder, something earned through blood and sacrifice. "We'll see." He gestured toward the equipment shed. "Let's get you checked in and issued your gear. Competition starts at 600 tomorrow. You'll bunk in Building 3 tonight." As they walked, Grace noticed the conversations resuming behind them. Hushed, but animated. She caught fragments drifting on the hot California breeze. Political statement. "Won't last a day. They're really doing this." The equipment shed was a treasure trove of military hardware. Long tables displayed an impressive array of rifles that represented the cutting edge of American engineering and lethality. Modern SR-25s with advanced optics packages that could resolve a man's face at 1,500 yards. Barrett M82s that could punch through armor at 2,000 yards. Precision instruments that cost more than most people's cars and embodied decades of research into making killing efficient. Grace's pulse quickened despite herself. She'd trained on standard-issue equipment at Quantico. Good rifles, reliable, but this was next-level gear. The kind of weapons that turned good shooters into legendary ones. "All right, people, listen up." Reeves' voice boomed across the shed like artillery fire. 15 men turned to face him. The best snipers from every branch of the military, SEALs, Marine Scout snipers, Army Rangers, Air Force Special Operations. Each one had been selected because they represented excellence in the deadliest form of warfare. And Grace, the only woman, the only question mark. "We've got 15 competitors this year," Reeves continued. "Mix of services, mix of experience, but all of you are here for the same reason, to prove you're the best marksman in America's arsenal." A young SEAL with lieutenant bars stepped forward with a clipboard. He began calling out names and equipment assignments. His voice was crisp, professional. Each assignment met with satisfied nods from the recipients. Lieutenant Commander Patterson, SR-25 with Schmidt and Bender, PMII scope. A lean man with calculating eyes stepped forward. Commander Daniel Patterson, call sign, Ghost. 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 37 confirmed kills, according to the whispered stories that followed him. He accepted the rifle like it was an extension of his own body, something he'd been born knowing how to use. Captain Anderson, Barrett M82A1 with Leupold Mark 5H D. Staff Sergeant Chen, M40A6 with Night Force ATACR. The list continued. Each competitor received weapons that matched their skills, tools that would give them every advantage that American technology and taxpayer money could provide. Lieutenant Mitchell, custom SR-25 with integrated ballistic computer and thermal optics package. A SEAL in his early 30s stepped forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, rising star in naval special warfare. He'd made no secret of his opinion that this competition should remain what it had always been, a proving ground for warriors, not a stage for political theater. Mitchell examined his rifle with the reverence of a craftsman receiving a masterwork. The optics package alone cost $15,000. It calculated windage automatically, compensated for temperature and humidity, measured range with laser precision, even accounted for the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself affecting bullet trajectory. "Like having a PhD in every shot," Mitchell said to the SEAL beside him. Loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough to make his point clear. Grace kept her face neutral, showed nothing. Her father had taught her that reaction was weakness. Emotion was ammunition you handed to your enemy. "Captain Thornton," Grace stepped forward. Every eye in the shed turned toward her. The moment stretched. Reeves reached beneath the table and pulled out a battered green case that looked like it had survived a war. Because it had. The metal clasps were tarnished with age and exposure. The canvas covering was frayed and stained with decades of use and abuse, and the honest wear that came from being trusted in places where trust meant survival. Reeves set it on the table with a heavy thunk that echoed in the sudden silence. "Your rifle, Captain." Grace opened the case slowly. Inside, nestled in deteriorating foam that had lost its cushioning decades ago, lay an M14 battle rifle, Vietnam era. The wood stock was scratched and worn smooth by countless hands. The barrel showed honest use, character earned through combat and maintained through care. And mounted on top was a scope that had clearly seen better days, better decades. The mounting bracket was bent at an angle that made it useless. Through the glass, Grace could see the reticle was completely misaligned, twisted almost 45 degrees. Shattered internal mechanisms visible through cracks in the housing. The shed fell absolutely silent. Grace ran her fingers along the rifle's receiver. She knew this weapon, had cleaned it, had fired it, had learned the fundamentals of marksmanship with it in the mountains of Montana, where her father had taught her that being a warrior wasn't about equipment, it was about will. It was about discipline. It was about mastering fundamentals that didn't change regardless of technology or fashion or time. This was her father's rifle, the one he'd carried through Hue City in February 1968, the one he'd used to save 37 Marines during the bloodiest urban combat of the Vietnam War, the one he'd brought home and maintained with the same care he'd given it in combat, the same ritual cleaning, the same inspection, the same respect for a tool that had kept him alive when everything else had failed. But the scope was completely unusable. Anyone could see that. The mounting screws were stripped. The internal mechanism was damaged beyond any field repair. This scope would never function properly again. "Is there a problem, Captain?" Reeves' voice was neutral, but his eyes were challenging her, testing her. Every person in that shed was watching, waiting, expecting her to complain, to demand equal equipment, to prove she needed special treatment. Grace examined the scope more closely. The mounting screws that weren't stripped turned easily in her fingers. She removed the damaged optic and set it aside carefully, with reverence, because even broken, it represented her father's service. Beneath the scope mount, she found what she was looking for. The rifle's original iron sights, simple, reliable, no batteries, no glass, no technology to fail, just steel and skill in the fundamentals that had kept warriors alive for centuries. She worked the action to ensure it functioned smoothly. The bolt moved with well-worn ease, a weapon that had been maintained by someone who understood that a rifle was more than metal and wood. It was a trust, a responsibility, a tool that deserved respect. She checked the barrel, clean, properly maintained. Someone had cared for this rifle, even if they'd given it to her as a test. Grace looked up at Master Chief Reeves, met his eyes with absolute certainty. "No problem, Master Chief. If it was good enough for my father at Hue, it's good enough for me here." She chambered an empty round, tested the feel, the weight, the balance of a weapon that had proven itself when everything else had failed. "Iron sights will do just fine." The shed erupted, not in approval, in disbelief. Murmurs rippled through the assembled competitors like shockwaves from an explosion. "Iron sights at 600 yards? Against our optics? This isn't 1968. Lieutenant Mitchell actually laughed, a short bark of sound that carried more derision than humor. "You're going to shoot iron sights against AI-assisted ballistic computers? Ma'am, with all due respect, that's suicide. You won't make it past day one." Commander Patterson studied her with renewed interest. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't mocking. He was evaluating, calculating, trying to understand if she was brave or foolish or something else entirely. Master Chief Reeves raised his hand. The shed fell silent immediately. The kind of silence that only came from absolute authority earned through decades of leading men in combat, through making decisions that sent warriors into hell and brought them back alive. "Gentlemen, Captain Thornton." His voice carried weight, history, truth that couldn't be argued with. "We've spent millions of dollars on technology that makes you better shooters. Computers that calculate what you used to have to learn. Optics that see what you used to have to feel. Electronics that compensate for what you used to have to master." He paused. Let the words sink in like water into dry ground. "But when that technology fails, and it will fail, what's left? The warrior or the machine?" His eyes swept across the assembled shooters, lingered on Mitchell, on Patterson, on the others who carried weapons that cost more than some people earned in a year. Then he looked at Grace. "Some of us believe the warrior makes the weapon deadly. Others think it's the other way around." He picked up her father's M14, held it like it weighed nothing, like it was sacred. "This rifle fought at Hue City in 1968, saved American lives when everything else had failed. Technology broke, radios died, modern weapons jammed, but this rifle kept working. This rifle kept killing America's enemies. This rifle brought a good man home. Reeves set the rifle back in its case, closed the lid with reverence. This week, we'll answer a question. Can the old ways still work? Or have we evolved past the fundamentals that forged warriors for 10,000 years? Captain Thornton is going to help us find out. He looked at Grace directly. You've got 30 minutes to zero your weapon on the 100-yard range before dark, Captain. I suggest you use that time wisely. Grace lifted the rifle case, felt its weight, heavier than modern weapons, more unwieldy. But there was something honest about it, something that didn't make promises it couldn't keep. Need help figuring out how to work it? The voice came from somewhere in the back. Grace didn't see who, didn't care. More laughter rippled through the shed. Not malicious exactly, just certain, confident. The kind of certainty that came from never having been proven wrong. Grace walked toward the door. The M14 felt comfortable on her shoulder, despite its age, despite its limitations. Because limitations were only failures if you let them define you. Outside, the California sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific. Golden light painted everything in shades that reminded Grace of Montana, of mountains, of a father teaching his daughter that the world didn't care about your excuses, only your results. The 100-yard range stretched before her. Targets waited in neat rows, simple silhouettes against white backing. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just the fundamentals of marksmanship that had defined warfare since the invention of accurate rifles. Grace walked to the firing line, set her rifle down carefully, began her pre-shoot routine, the same one her father had taught her in the mountains when she was 12 years old. When he decided she was old enough to understand that shooting wasn't about killing, it was about discipline, control, mastery of self before mastery of weapon. Behind her, several competitors had followed outside to watch. They leaned against the shed wall, arms crossed, ready for the show, ready to see confirmation of what they already believed. Grace ignored them, built walls in her mind, created a space where only she and the target existed, where doubt and pressure and expectation couldn't follow, where there was only breath and trigger and the fundamental truth that marksmanship was mathematics you could feel. She loaded 5 rounds, 7.62 NATO ammunition that had been manufactured decades ago but maintained with care, assumed a solid prone position that her body remembered from 10,000 repetitions, aligned her iron sights on the target. 100 yards downrange, the silhouette waited. No computers calculated windage, no laser measured distance, no thermal imaging revealed heat signatures, no ballistic processor compensated for atmospheric conditions, just her eyes, her breath, her father's voice in her memory. Technology is a crutch, Grace. Learn to shoot with your heart and your head. Everything else is just decoration. She exhaled slowly, let her heartbeat settle into the rhythm she'd practiced until it became unconscious, until her pulse was something she controlled rather than something that controlled her. 4 beats per breath cycle. Fire on the natural pause between exhale and inhale. When the body was stillest, when the rifle was steadiest, the front sight post aligned with the rear aperture, creating that perfect figure 8 that separated marksmen from shooters. The target sat at the top of her front post, exactly where it needed to be, floating there like it was waiting for the bullet. Grace's finger caressed the trigger. Not a pull, a squeeze. So gentle it seemed to surprise even her when the M14 roared. The recoil was solid, true, driving straight back into her shoulder with honest force. Nothing cushioned, nothing compensated, just physics and Newton's laws expressing themselves through wood and steel. Downrange, a perfect hole appeared in the 10-ring, center mass. Grace chambered her second round. Her movements were economical, practiced. She'd learned long ago not to rush between shots. Each one deserved its own moment, its own calculation, its own respect. The rifle's barrel had warmed slightly from that first shot, which would affect the bullet's trajectory by mere centimeters. But at 600 yards tomorrow, centimeters would become feet, misses instead of kills. The difference between success and failure. She made an infinitesimal adjustment, shifted her point of aim by a fraction so small it was almost imaginary, compensating for barrel temperature, for the microscopic expansion of metal under heat. Then fired again. Another perfect 10-ring hit. Third shot, fourth, fifth. Each one felt correct. That indefinable sensation when everything aligned, breath and trigger and sight picture, and the universe itself seeming to hold still for that fraction of a second when the firing pin struck the primer. When all the variables collapsed into a single point of certainty. By her fifth shot, the group of spectators had grown silent. The casual mockery had evaporated like morning mist, replaced by something harder to define, something that looked almost like respect, or maybe fear. The fear that came from watching someone accomplish what you'd been certain was impossible. All 5 rounds had clustered within a 2-inch circle at center mass. Performance that matched or exceeded what the others had achieved with their advanced optics and computer-assisted calculations. Grace stood, cleared her weapon with practiced movements that were as automatic as breathing, ejected the magazine, locked the bolt to the rear, visually inspected the chamber, the ritual of making a weapon safe, then turned back toward the shed. Master Chief Reeves stood at the edge of the range now, binoculars in hand. He'd been watching through the glass, observing, measuring, searching for that quality he'd seen in her father 56 years ago in a city that had tried to kill them both. Their eyes met across the distance. Reeves nodded once, barely perceptible, then turned and walked away without a word. But that nod said everything. Commander Patterson remained, still studying her with those calculating eyes. Unlike the others, he hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, just watched and evaluated and tried to understand what he was seeing. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Captain?" Grace shouldered her rifle. The M14 felt like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. "My father, Colonel James Thornton, 1st Battalion, 26 Marines, Hue City, 1968. He taught me that real marksmen don't need crutches, sir. They need discipline." Patterson's expression shifted, something that might have been recognition, or memory, or respect for a name that carried weight in circles where legends were measured in confirmed kills and lives saved. "He taught you well. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." Grace walked past him toward her assigned barracks. The evening air was cooling, the Pacific breeze carrying salt and the promise of another perfect California day tomorrow. Behind her, the sunset painted the ocean in shades of orange and red, the same ocean her father had crossed in 1967, heading toward a war that would define him. That would test whether the fundamentals he'd learned could survive contact with an enemy that outnumbered him 10-1. He'd survived, had proven the old ways worked, had brought those lessons home and passed them to his daughter with the same care he'd maintained his rifle. Now it was her turn. Grace reached her barracks room, small but clean, Spartan in the way that military spaces always were. Function over comfort. She set her father's rifle on the rack, opened her pack. Inside, carefully wrapped in a Marine Corps flag, was the photograph she always carried. Her father in his dress blues, taken just before his deployment to Vietnam in 1967. Young, strong, certain of purpose in a way that only came from believing absolutely in your mission. Grace set the photograph on her footlocker, sat on her bunk, stared at the face of a man who'd taught her everything that mattered. "I did good today, Dad," she whispered to the image, to the memory, to the legacy that had brought her here. "Tomorrow, we'll see if I can keep it up." Somewhere across the compound, competitors were checking their equipment, calibrating their computers, running diagnostics on optics packages that cost more than her truck, trusting in technology to give them the edge they needed. Grace cleaned her father's rifle, used the same techniques he'd taught her, the same care he'd shown, disassembled the bolt, cleaned the firing pin channel, swabbed the barrel, inspected every component for wear or damage. Because a weapon was more than a tool, it was a trust, a responsibility to every warrior who'd carried it before. Tomorrow would bring the real test, 600-yard precision shooting, the first time she'd have to prove that iron sights could compete with the full might of modern technology. But tonight, she'd already sent a message. Underestimate her at your own risk. Dawn broke over Naval Special Warfare Command with a kind of crystalline clarity that made snipers smile. Not a cloud in the sky, minimal wind, perfect visibility stretching for miles across the range. The kind of morning that separated good shooters from great ones. When there were no excuses, no environmental factors to blame, just skill against skill. Grace had been awake since 0430, running through her morning routine with mechanical precision. Physical training, 3 miles at 7-minute pace, shower, equipment check, breakfast that was pure fuel, oatmeal, eggs, black coffee, nothing that would spike her blood sugar or cloud her focus. Now standing on the firing line at 0545, she could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on every competitor. 15 of the military's best marksmen, all gathered for one purpose, to prove they were the deadliest shooter in America's arsenal. Master Chief Reeves stood at the command post, his khaki uniform already showing sweat stains from the morning heat that was building despite the early hour. Behind him, a scoreboard displayed competitor names in alphabetical order. Grace's name sat near the top, a target waiting to be knocked down. "Gentlemen and Captain Thornton," Reeves's voice boomed across the range like artillery fire. "Welcome to day 1. Today's challenge is straightforward. 600-yard precision shooting. 5 rounds, 5 targets, standard silhouettes." He paused. Let the simplicity of the task settle into their minds before adding the complications. Wind is calm at 3 miles per hour from 280 degrees. Temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity at 45%. Barometric pressure is standard at 29.92 inches. Conditions are as close to perfect as you'll ever see in combat, which means there are no excuses. Your skill is the only variable that matters today. His hard eyes scanned the line of shooters. Your equipment may be different, but the standard is the same. Excellence, nothing less. Grace glanced down the line at her competition. To her left, 3 Navy SEALs stood with their advanced rifles, tactical gear gleaming in the morning sun. Lieutenant Commander Patterson was among them, his SR-25 equipped with a Schmidt & Bender PMII scope that cost more than Grace's first car. The optics package included laser range finding, automatic windage calculation, temperature compensation, even automatic cant adjustment. Every advantage that American engineering and unlimited budget could provide. Beyond him, Army Rangers and Air Force Special Operators adjusted their weapons, checking ballistic computers, calibrating laser systems, running diagnostics on equipment that represented the cutting edge of sniper technology. And then there was Grace, holding a rifle that had been obsolete before she was born, iron sights that her grandfather's generation would have recognized. No computers, no lasers, no electronics to give her an edge, just fundamentals. "Shooters will rotate in alphabetical order by last name," Reeves continued. "Captain Anderson, you're up first. Lieutenant Chen second. Captain Thornton third." Perfect. Grace would see how others perform first, get a read on the range conditions, watch for subtle wind patterns the flags might miss, learn from their successes and failures before she ever touched her trigger. Captain Bradley Anderson was an Army Ranger with a reputation for cold bore shots. First-round accuracy that bordered on supernatural. His rifle was a thing of beauty, a custom AR-10 with every upgrade imaginable, free-floating barrel, match-grade trigger, custom-bedded stock, optics that could resolve a man's facial features at 1,000 yards. He assumed his position. The range fell silent except for the gentle flutter of wind flags and the distant sound of waves against the California coast. 5 shots rang out in steady succession. Professional, controlled, each one separated by exactly 15 seconds of breathing and recalculation. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. 4 10s, 1 9, total score 49. Solid performance. The 9 had clipped the edge of the 10 ring by maybe half an inch, barely a miss at all. Anderson stood and nodded, satisfied but not celebrating. He knew 49 wasn't enough to win, just enough to stay in contention. Lieutenant David Chen approached the line next. Marine Scout Sniper. 2 deployments to Afghanistan. Grace had heard stories about his performance in Helmand Province. Shots that had saved entire patrols from ambush. Confirmed kills from ranges that seemed impossible. Chen's M40A6 was equipped with Night Force ATACR optics, military-grade glass that could punch through atmospheric distortion and heat shimmer like they didn't exist. His 5 shots came even faster than Anderson's. Confidence built on hundreds of confirmed kills. Muscle memory that didn't require conscious thought. 5 10s, perfect score 50. Murmurs of approval rippled through the competitors. Chen had set the bar high, proven that perfection was possible under these conditions. Now everyone else would be chasing that standard. Captain Thornton, you're up. Grace walked to the firing line. Every eye followed her movement. She could hear the whispered comments even though the competitors tried to keep them low. Let's see what she's got. Iron sights at 600. This should be interesting. Probably won't even hit the target. Give her credit for trying at least. Grace tuned them out. Years of competitions had taught her how to build walls in her mind, creating a space where only she and the target existed, where doubt and pressure and expectation couldn't follow, where there was only breath and trigger and mathematics. She set down her shooting mat, the same one her father had used, worn canvas that had absorbed the sweat and blood of 100 shooting positions. Assumed a solid prone position that her body knew better than her own heartbeat. Left leg straight, right leg bent at the knee, supporting hand under the rifle's forestock, shooting hand gripping the pistol grip with just enough pressure to control without tensing. She loaded 5 rounds into the M14's magazine. The brass cartridges caught the morning sun as she chambered the first round. The bolt moved forward with a solid click of mechanical certainty, a sound that had meant readiness for generations of warriors. 600 yards downrange, her target waited. A simple silhouette, black against white backing. Without optics, it appeared small, barely larger than her thumbnail from this distance. A dot on the horizon that she was supposed to hit 5 times in succession. But Grace didn't need to see details. She needed to see fundamentals. She settled her cheek against the wooden stock, feeling its familiar contours, the slight dip where her father's cheek had rested for decades, the smooth wear pattern from a lifetime of proper technique. Through the iron sights, she aligned the front post with the rear aperture, creating that perfect figure 8 that her father had drilled into her consciousness until it became involuntary. The target sat at the top of her front sight post, exactly where it needed to be, floating there like a promise waiting to be kept. Now came the mathematics, the calculations that separated marksmen from shooters, that turned lead and brass into precision instruments of warfare. Range 600 yards, wind 3 miles per hour from 280 degrees, quartering from the left. Call it a quarter minute of angle, maybe a hair more. At 600 yards, that meant the bullet would drift approximately 2 inches right without compensation. Elevation, sea level. No significant adjustment needed for altitude. Temperature, 68 degrees. Cool morning. Air is dense. Bullets will fly true with predictable trajectory. Humidity, 45%. Moderate, negligible effect at this distance, but worth noting. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Not words exactly, more like a feeling, a certainty that transcended language. The rifle doesn't think, Grace. You do the thinking. You do the math. The rifle just does what you tell it. Grace made her adjustments, mental calculations that happened faster than conscious thought, shifted her point of aim ever so slightly to compensate for the gentle westerly breeze. Not much, just enough. A fraction of an inch that would become 6 inches of correction at target distance. The difference between center mass and a miss. She controlled her breathing, let it settle into the rhythm she'd practiced 10,000 times. Inhale for 4 heartbeats, exhale for 4 heartbeats, natural pause for 2 heartbeats. The world narrowed to a single point. Her finger caressed the trigger, slowly, gently, like touching something precious that might break if handled roughly. The M14 roared, recoil sharp but manageable, driving straight back into her shoulder. Honest force that didn't lie or compensate or make promises it couldn't keep. Downrange, through the iron sights, she couldn't see where the bullet had struck, but she felt it. Center mass, perfect. The shot had felt exactly right, that indefinable sensation when every variable aligned. Grace chambered her second round. Her movements were economical, practiced. She'd learned long ago not to rush between shots. Each one deserved its own moment, its own calculation, its own respect. The wind hadn't changed. She could feel it on her face. Still 3 miles per hour from the same direction. Temperature steady, but she made an infinitesimal adjustment anyway. The rifle's barrel had warmed slightly from that first shot, maybe 5 degrees, which would affect the bullet's trajectory by mere centimeters as the expanding metal changed harmonics. But at 600 yards, centimeters mattered. They were the difference between perfection and almost. Her second shot broke clean. That perfect surprise when the trigger breaks at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. Third shot. The barrel was warmer now, settling into its rhythm. Grace adjusted her point of aim by a microscopic amount, compensating for the harmonics she could feel more than calculate. Fourth shot. Wind had picked up slightly, maybe half a mile per hour. She led the target a fraction more. Fifth shot. Final round. The one that would determine if she'd matched Chen's perfect score or fallen short. Grace went through her entire process again. Breathing, wind check, barrel temperature assessment, sight alignment, trigger press. The rifle fired. Each shot had felt perfect. That indefinable sensation when everything aligned, breath in trigger and sight picture and the universe itself seeming to hold still for that fraction of a second when physics and skill and will all converged into a single point of impact. Grace cleared her weapon, stood, stepped back from the line. Her face betrayed nothing, but her heart hammered in her chest. She'd done everything right, felt every shot land true, but without a spotting scope, she couldn't see her results. Couldn't know if feeling translated to reality. The range officer walked down range with binoculars, examining her target. The silence stretched. Grace could feel every competitor's eyes on her back. The weight of their judgment, their skepticism, their certainty that iron sights couldn't compete with modern technology. The range officer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Stand by for scoring." Master Chief Reeves walked to the observation post, took the binoculars, looked for himself. His weathered face remained impassive, but Grace noticed his eyebrows rise slightly, the first crack in his stoic expression she'd seen since arriving. Reeves lowered the binoculars, keyed his radio. "Confirm that score, Petty Officer." A pause, then the response crackled back. "Confirmed, Master Chief. 5 tens. Group measures 3.5 inches. Reeves's voice boomed across the range with a quality Grace couldn't quite identify. Pride, maybe, or vindication, or something deeper that only another warrior could understand. 5 10s, perfect score 50, all rounds within a 3.5-inch group. The silence that followed was deafening. Grace allowed herself the smallest smile, not because she was surprised. She'd felt every shot land true, but because she could feel the shift in the air around her. The whispers had stopped. The smirks had vanished. The certainty that she didn't belong had cracked like ice under pressure. Lieutenant Commander Patterson was the first to speak. He'd moved closer to the observation post to see her target through the spotting scope. His expression showed something Grace hadn't expected: genuine respect. "That's a tighter group than mine was," Patterson said loud enough for others to hear. "And I was using a scope that costs $8,000 with a computer that does half the thinking for me." "Beginner's luck," someone muttered from the back of the group. Grace didn't see who, didn't need to. Patterson turned, his eyes hard. The kind of hardness that came from leading men in combat, from making life and death decisions in fractions of seconds, from knowing the difference between skill and chance. Luck doesn't put 5 rounds in 3.5 inches at 600 yards. Luck is one good shot. 5 perfect shots is skill. That's discipline. That's fundamentals mastered to the point where they become unconscious. Captain Anderson approached Grace, extended his hand. His grip was firm, honest, the handshake of someone who recognized excellence regardless of who demonstrated it. "Hell of a shooting, Captain. That was impressive, truly impressive." "Thank you, sir." But not everyone was convinced. Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell crossed his arms, his expensive rifle slung across his chest like a statement, like proof that modern ways were better ways. "One good run doesn't prove anything. Let's see if she can keep it up when the challenges get harder, when the pressure increases." Grace met his eyes, kept her voice level, professional, gave him nothing to use against her. "Looking forward to it, Lieutenant." The competition continued through the morning. Patterson shot next after Grace. His performance was flawless. 5 perfect 10s with a 4.2-inch group. Excellent shooting by any standard. Better than 99% of trained marksmen could achieve, but not quite matching Grace's precision. Mitchell followed. His AI-assisted ballistic computer calculated every variable: wind, temperature, barometric pressure, even the rotation of the Earth itself and how it affected bullet trajectory over distance. His rifle was a marvel of engineering, a weapon system that cost taxpayers $50,000 when you included all the electronics. He shot a perfect 50, but his group measured 5 inches. Good, professional, but not extraordinary. By noon, all 15 competitors had completed their runs. The scoreboard told a story nobody had expected. First place, Lieutenant David Chen and Captain Grace Thornton, tied with perfect scores of 50 points. Grace's tighter group size gave her the technical edge on the leaderboard. Third place, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Patterson, 49 points with excellent group size. Fourth place, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, 50 points but larger group dispersion than the leaders. Master Chief Reeves consulted his clipboard. His voice carried across the assembled shooters with the weight of judgment earned through decades of combat. Current standings after round 1. Lieutenant Chen and Captain Thornton tied for first place with perfect scores. Captain Thornton's group size of 3.5 inches versus Lieutenant Chen's 4 inches gives her the #1 position. Lieutenant Commander Patterson in third with 49 points. Lieutenant Mitchell in fourth. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the assembled warriors like a searchlight finding targets. "This competition is far from over. We've got 4 more days and increasingly difficult challenges ahead. Day 2 starts at 600 tomorrow. Moving targets at variable distances and speeds. The targets won't wait for you to calculate. You'll have 3 seconds from appearance to impact. Get some rest. Check your equipment. Tomorrow separates the shooters from the snipers. As the group dispersed toward the mess hall for lunch, Patterson caught up with Grace near the equipment shed. His expression was thoughtful, calculating, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit his expectations. That was legitimate shooting back there, Captain. Not luck, not beginner's advantage. That was mastery. Just doing what I was trained to do, sir. Your father. You said Hue City, 1968. Grace nodded. The memory of her father was always close, always present. Like he was watching from somewhere beyond reach, but never beyond influence. Colonel James Thornton, 1st Battalion, 26th Marines. He had over 60 confirmed kills during the Tet Offensive. The siege of Hue lasted 26 days. He was there for all of them. But he never talked about the number. He said every shot was a human life. And that weight never leaves you. It shouldn't leave you. The day it does, you become something less than human. Patterson's expression softened. Recognition of something that transcended competition. That connected all warriors who'd pulled triggers in anger, who'd taken lives to save lives. He sounds like he was a wise man, a good man. He was. He taught me that being a sniper isn't about killing, it's about protecting. Every shot you take saves friendly lives. That's the burden and the honor, the responsibility that keeps you awake at night and gets you up in the morning. I wish more shooters understood that. Patterson glanced back at the range where technicians were collecting targets for official scoring records. Day 2 tomorrow. Moving targets in variable conditions. Weather forecast says possible rain and wind by afternoon. Your iron sights might actually give you an advantage if the electronics start acting up in the moisture. We'll see, sir. Every challenge is different. Every day brings new variables. Indeed it does. Patterson paused, then added quietly, "For what it's worth, Captain, I'm glad you're here. This competition needed someone to remind us what marksmanship looked like before computers did our thinking for us." But as Grace walked toward her barracks, she felt something nagging at her, a sense that something was wrong, off, like the feeling you get when someone's been in your room while you were gone. She reached her door. The lock looked normal, but when she opened it, her equipment had been moved. Subtle, nothing obvious, but Grace was trained to notice details. Her ammunition box sat on the table, in the wrong position, rotated 90 degrees from where she'd left it. She opened the box carefully, counted the rounds, 35 cartridges. She'd organized 50 rounds last night, counted them twice to be absolutely certain, arranged them in neat rows of 10. 15 rounds were missing. Grace examined the door lock more closely. Fresh scratches around the mechanism. Amateur work, but effective. Someone had picked it, entered while she'd been at the range. Stolen ammunition that could mean the difference between winning and losing. She sat on her bunk, stared at the evidence of sabotage. Her first instinct was to report it immediately, march straight to Master Chief Reeves and demand an investigation, demand justice. But something her father had taught her echoed in memory. Never make excuses, Grace. The world doesn't care why you failed. It only cares that you failed. Excuses are what weak people use to justify their inadequacy. Warriors adapt. They overcome. They win despite the obstacles. She pulled out her notebook, documented everything. Time discovered, number of rounds missing, description of lock scratches. Everything that might matter later for an official investigation. But she didn't report it. Not yet. Because complaining would play into their hands, would prove she needed special treatment, would confirm the suspicion that she couldn't compete on equal terms. Instead, she inspected every remaining round with meticulous care, checking for damage, for tampering, for anything that might cause a malfunction at the worst possible moment. Looking for scratches on the brass casings, dents in the primers, anything that suggested someone had done more than just steal ammunition. Everything appeared intact. Whoever had taken the rounds had been careful not to leave obvious evidence of tampering with what remained. Grace cleaned her rifle, maintained it with the same ritual her father had taught her. Because some things mattered more than competition, more than winning, the discipline, the care, the respect for tradition that connected generations of warriors. She disassembled the bolt, cleaned every component, inspected the firing pin for wear, checked the extractor tension, examined the barrel throat for erosion. The ritual was meditative, calming, a connection to her father and to every warrior who'd maintained weapons with the same care. Tomorrow would bring moving targets, a new challenge, a new test, scenarios that would require split-second calculations and instinctive shooting. The kind of shooting where iron sights would be at maximum disadvantage against computer-assisted optics. But tonight, someone had declared war. Not with bullets, but with sabotage. With the kind of attack that happened in shadows, that couldn't be answered with marksmanship. Grace lay back on her bunk, stared at the ceiling, her father's photograph watched from the footlocker. Young and strong and certain, ready to face whatever Vietnam would throw at him. "They're trying to make me fail, Dad," she whispered to the image, to the memory, to the legacy. "But you taught me better than that. You taught me that excuses don't matter, only results. That the measure of a warrior isn't how they perform when everything goes right. It's how they perform when everything goes wrong." Sleep came slowly, but when it came, it brought dreams of Montana, of mountains, of a father teaching his daughter that the only person who could truly defeat you was yourself. Day 2 arrived with complications Grace hadn't anticipated. At 0400, while preparing her equipment in the pre-dawn darkness, she discovered something that made her stomach tighten with controlled anger. The competition bulletin board had no posting about practice sessions, but when she overheard 2 Army Rangers discussing yesterday's familiarization training while walking to breakfast, reality became crystal clear. "Yeah, that moving target system is tricky. Good thing we got those 3 hours of practice yesterday afternoon. Learned all the timing sequences. Got a feel for the different speeds." "Definitely. I'd hate to go in cold on that course. No way you'd score well without practice time." Everyone else had practiced on the moving target system yesterday afternoon. Run through the course multiple times. Learned the patterns. Got comfortable with the timing. Everyone except Grace. She kept her face neutral as she walked to the range. Showed nothing. Revealed no emotion. But internally, the sabotage was escalating. First the missing ammunition, now denied preparation time. Someone was determined to see her fail, determined to prove she didn't belong. By 0600, 15 competitors stood on the modified range. The morning was perfect, clear, calm, no excuses. The moving target system was impressive, engineering marvel, silhouettes mounted on rails that could move in any direction, parallel to the shooting line, perpendicular to it, diagonal angles that created complex lead calculations. Each target appeared at random intervals controlled by computer, stayed visible for exactly 3 seconds before disappearing into concealment behind barriers. Electronic sensors recorded hits and misses with unforgiving accuracy. No disputes, no arguments, just data. Master Chief Reeves stood at the command post. His voice carried the authority of decades leading warriors in combat. Day 2, moving targets, distances from 400 to 1,000 yards. Speeds from 2 to 15 miles per hour. Directions are random, computer-controlled. Unpredictable patterns. You'll have 3 seconds per target. See it. Calculate lead and drop. Engage. 10 targets total. Miss and you lose points. Simple as that. He paused. Let the difficulty sink in. This tests your ability to make instant calculations under pressure. In combat, targets don't wait for you to consult your ballistic computer. They don't stand still while you dial in your scope. They move. They evade. They try to survive. Today you prove you can hit them anyway. Grace studied the range during the safety brief, trying to understand movement patterns, looking for rhythms or predictability. anything that would compensate for her lack of practice time. But the system was truly random. Computer-generated patterns that didn't repeat. The only advantage practice time would have given was familiarity with the interface, understanding how targets appeared and disappeared, an advantage she'd been deliberately denied. Shooters will engage in order of current standings, Reeves continued. Lieutenant Chen, you're first. Captain Thornton, second. Chen approached the line with confidence. His Night Force optics allowed smooth target tracking, wide field of view, high magnification. He could acquire targets early and follow their movement through the scope. First target appeared at 600 yards, moving left to right at moderate speed. Chen's rifle barked. Hit. Second target, 400 yards, moving perpendicular. Hit. He worked through the sequence professionally, competently, but Grace noticed he hesitated slightly on the longer shots, the ones where calculation became more complex. Third target, miss. The target had changed speed mid-sequence, an acceleration that threw off his lead calculation. By the end, Chen had scored 7 hits out of 10. Respect just her eyes and her training, and thousands of hours of practice compressed into instinct. The first target appeared at 500 yards, moving diagonally across her field of view, northeast to southwest, maybe 8 miles per hour. Grace's mind processed variables in microseconds. Distance, 500 yards. Velocity, 8 miles per hour, means target moving roughly 12 feet per second. Time of flight at this distance, approximately 0.7 seconds. Target will travel 8 to 9 feet during flight time. Lead by approximately 3 feet given the angle. Wind 3 miles per hour from the west. Adds maybe 6 inches of drift. Barrel temperature, cool. First shot, no compensation needed. Her front sight post led the target by what felt right. What thousands of hours of practice had burned into muscle memory, she squeezed. Hit. The sensor light illuminated green, confirming what she'd felt. Target 2 appeared at 900 yards, moving perpendicular to her position, west to east. Faster now, maybe 12 miles per hour. Longer distance meant more flight time, more lead required, more wind drift to compensate for, more variables to calculate in the fraction of a second before the target disappeared. Grace adjusted, her breathing controlled. Fired, hit. She moved through the sequence like flowing water, each decision happening faster than conscious thought, each shot feeling correct before the sensor confirmed it. Target 3, 500 yards, moving toward her at an angle, closing distance, lead calculation complicated by the geometry. Hit. Target 4, 700 yards, erratic movement, speed changes. Grace watched for half a second, identified the deceleration pattern, led it appropriately. Hit. Target 5, 600 yards, moving fast, perpendicular, simple calculation. Hit. 6, 800 yards, diagonal. Hit. 7, 400 yards, close and fast. Hit. 8, 1,000 yards, moving slow but maximum distance. Hit. The 9th target appeared at maximum range, 1,000 yards, moving at maximum speed, 15 miles per hour, appearing from behind cover for only 3 seconds. This was the nightmare scenario. Maximum distance, maximum speed, minimum time. Grace saw it appear, tracked its movement for 1 second, calculating frantically. 1,000 yards meant approximately 1.5 seconds flight time. Target moving 15 miles per hour meant 22 feet per second. During flight time, target would travel 33 feet. Lead required was massive. She aimed what felt like a full body length ahead of the silhouette. Fired. The sensor remained dark. Miss. She'd led too far. Anticipated acceleration that hadn't happened. Overcompensated for the distance. Grace cleared her mind, refused to dwell on failure. One target remained, one chance to finish strong. The 10th target appeared at 650 yards, moving erratically. Speed changes designed to fool even computer-assisted calculations, accelerating and decelerating in a pattern that seemed random. Grace watched for 1 full second, burning precious time, but identifying the pattern, it wasn't truly random. There was rhythm, predictability hidden in apparent chaos. The target accelerated for 2 seconds, decelerated for 1 second, repeated. She waited for the deceleration phase, led the target accounting for its slowing speed. Fired. Hit. 9 hits, 1 miss, the range officer announced, his voice neutral but carrying a note of surprise. Captain Thornton ties Lieutenant Chen for Day 2 lead with 9 hits each. The range fell silent. Tying the competition's best shooter while using iron sights against computer-controlled moving targets exceeded what anyone had expected. It was one thing to shoot static targets at known distances. It was entirely different to engage moving targets that required instant calculation and instinctive shooting. Commander Patterson shot next after Grace. His SR-25 with advanced ballistic computer and tracking optics gave him every advantage. The computer calculated lead automatically based on target velocity. The scope's tracking feature allowed him to follow targets smoothly. He managed 9 hits, same as Grace and Chen. Excellent performance that demonstrated why he'd earned his reputation. Lieutenant Mitchell followed. His expensive rifle with integrated ballistics should have given him an edge. But something was wrong. His shots were rushed, hurried, like he was trying to prove something instead of just shooting well. He scored 8 hits. Good, professional, but not exceptional. His frustration was visible as he cleared his weapon and left the line. The remaining competitors shot through the morning. Results ranged from 5 to 9 hits. The moving targets were proving brutally difficult even with advanced technology. By 1100 hours, the standings had shifted slightly. First place, Captain Grace Thornton, Lieutenant David Chen, and Lieutenant Commander Daniel Patterson, all tied with 9 hits out of 10 possible. Fourth place, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell with 8 hits. During the lunch break, Grace found Patterson near the equipment shed. He was cleaning his rifle with the careful attention of someone who understood that weapons required respect and maintenance. "Hell of a performance out there, Captain," Patterson said without looking up from his work. "That 9th target was nearly impossible. Maybe actually impossible. I missed it too on my run today." "You practiced yesterday afternoon, though." Patterson looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Wait, you practiced yesterday too, right?" They ran familiarization sessions from 1400 to 1700 hours. Grace's expression darkened slightly. "I wasn't informed there were practice sessions." Patterson's eyes widened, then hardened. "That's not right. That's not just unfair. That's deliberate sabotage. Everyone should have been notified. Everyone should have had equal preparation time." He set down his cleaning rod, his voice taking on an edge. "What else has gone wrong?" Grace hesitated. Pride versus pragmatism warring inside her. Her father had always said pride was a sniper's worst enemy. It clouded judgment, got people killed in combat, made you stupid when you needed to be smart. "Someone took 15 rounds from my ammunition last night, broke into my quarters while I was sleeping. I found fresh scratches on my door lock. The ammunition box had been moved. 15 rounds missing. Did you report it? I've documented everything, photographed the lock scratches, counted the remaining ammunition, written down exact times and observations. But I haven't filed a formal report yet." Patterson stood, his expression serious. "Report it now, today, before dinner formation. This isn't about special treatment, Grace. This is about integrity. Tampering with a competitor's equipment and supplies is grounds for immediate disqualification and possible criminal charges. If someone's doing this to you, they need to be caught and stopped before it gets worse. I don't want to seem like I'm making excuses." "It's not an excuse, it's a fact. Look, I respect that you want to prove yourself on merit, that you don't want special treatment, But there's a difference between earning your place and allowing someone to cheat you out of what you've earned. Patterson's voice softened slightly. You shot 9 out of 10 moving targets with iron sights and no practice time. That's not just impressive, that's borderline miraculous. You've already proven yourself. Now let the system work. Let Master Chief Reeves investigate. Let whoever's doing this face consequences. Grace considered his words, the logic, the truth that silence could be its own form of weakness. I'll report it to Master Chief Reeves before 1700 hours. Good. Patterson returned to his rifle, then added quietly, that shooting this morning was some of the best I've ever seen. Iron sights against moving targets at 1,000 yards. Most people would say, that's impossible. The fact that you hit 9 out of 10 without practice time, that's skill that can't be taught. That's instinct earned through years of discipline. My father never taught me to believe in impossible. He taught me that impossible is what people say when they haven't trained hard enough. Patterson smiled, a genuine expression. I like that. Your father sounds like he was a hell of a Marine. That afternoon at 16:30 hours, Grace reported everything to Master Chief Reeves in his office. His face remained impassive as he took notes with meticulous care, writing down every detail, every observation, but his eyes showed cold fury that reminded Grace why this man had earned the Navy Cross, why Marines had followed him into hell and trusted him to bring them back alive. 15 rounds missing from your ammunition supply, Reeves repeated, his voice carefully controlled. Fresh scratches on your door lock indicating forced entry, and you were not notified about practice sessions that every other competitor attended. Yes, Master Chief. And you're reporting this now, a full day after discovering it because... I didn't want to seem like I was making excuses, sir. Didn't want special treatment. Reeves leaned back in his chair, studied her with those eyes that had seen too much combat. Captain Thornton, let me be crystal clear about something. Reporting sabotage is not making excuses. It's reporting a crime. There is no universe in which stealing a competitor's ammunition and denying them practice time constitutes a fair competition. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the range. I'll have security review all barracks footage from the past 48 hours. I'll personally inspect your equipment and ammunition supplies going forward, and I'll ensure you receive notice of all future practice sessions and briefings. Thank you, Master Chief. Don't thank me, Captain. This is basic integrity, the minimum standard. He turned back to face her. But I will say this, you shot 9 out of 10 moving targets today with iron sights and 0 practice time. Your performance is not just competitive, it's exceptional. Your father would be proud. Grace felt emotion welling up but forced it down. Warriors didn't cry in their commander's office. There's something else you should know, Reeves continued, his voice dropping lower, more personal. I haven't told you the full story about your father and me, about what happened in Hue. Grace's breath caught. Sir? Sit down, Captain. This might take a few minutes. Grace sat. Reeves returned to his desk but didn't sit. He stood, looking at something beyond the walls of his office, seeing another time, another place. February 1968, Hue City, 3rd week of the battle. The NVA had us completely pinned down in the MACV compound. We'd lost communication with higher command. Couldn't call for artillery support. Couldn't get airstrikes. The weather was shit, smoke and rain. Visibility maybe 50 meters on a good day. His voice took on the quality of someone reciting sacred text, remembering details that mattered. There was an NVA sniper, somewhere in the Citadel. We never spotted him, never even saw muzzle flash. But he'd been picking us off for 6 hours, methodical, patient, professional. He'd killed 7 Marines that morning, wounded 4 more, had us completely pinned. We couldn't move, couldn't evacuate the wounded, couldn't do anything but wait and die, one at a time. Reeves's hands gripped the back of his chair, knuckles white. Your father was positioned on the roof of the Treasury building, 400 yards from our position. We had no radio communication. He couldn't coordinate with us. He was operating completely independently, but through the smoke and rain, through visibility that made seeing impossible, he was watching, analyzing, hunting. Grace leaned forward, riveted. 850 yards through smoke and rain that should have made the shot impossible. Your father put that NVA sniper down. One shot. Iron sights. No laser rangefinder. No ballistic computer. No spotting scope. Just skill and will and decades of discipline compressed into one perfect trigger press. Reeves's voice roughened with emotion he usually kept buried. But he didn't stop there. He'd identified 11 more NVA soldiers attempting to flank our position, moving through the rubble, trying to get behind us where they could finish off the entire compound. Your father eliminated all 11 of them. 11 shots, 11 kills, ranges from 400 to 900 yards, through conditions that made seeing targets almost impossible. He met Grace's eyes directly. Your father's shooting that day saved 37 Marines. I was one of them, 19 years old, combat correspondent, not even supposed to be in the fighting. But when the NVA attacked, everyone fought. I was certain I was going to die in that compound, certain my mother would get a telegram and a folded flag. Your father's skill was the difference between me standing here and being a name on a memorial wall. Grace felt tears threatening but forced them back. He never told me details, just said Hugh was hell. The good ones carry it quiet. Reeves moved around his desk, sat down. But you need to know something else. Your father was recommended for the Silver Star that day. The paperwork was submitted. Witness statements taken. Everything documented. But during the chaos of the Tet Offensive, the paperwork got lost. Misfiled or destroyed, we don't know. He never received his medal. Never got the recognition he deserved for saving 37 American lives. Reeves opened a drawer in his desk, pulled out a file folder. That's one reason I brought you here, Captain. Not just to compete, but to finish what should have been completed 56 years ago. Grace stared at the folder. Sir, when this competition is over, regardless of how you place, there's going to be a ceremony. I've spent the last 3 years tracking down surviving witnesses from that day, collecting statements, rebuilding the documentation. Your father is finally going to receive his Silver Star, and I want you to be there to accept it on his behalf. Tears came now. Grace couldn't stop them, didn't try. He would be so proud, Master Chief. He should be proud of you, Captain. You're carrying his legacy forward. You're proving that the skills he mastered still matter in a world that thinks technology has made fundamentals obsolete. Reeves stood, handed her a tissue. Tomorrow is day 3. Weather forecast is calling for a storm, heavy rain, high winds. Your iron sights might actually give you an advantage when everyone else's electronics start failing. Get some rest. And Grace? It was the first time he'd used her first name. Yes, Master Chief? Watch your back. Whoever's sabotaging you isn't going to stop just because you reported it. They're escalating. And people who feel threatened do desperate things. That evening, Grace sat in her barracks with the door locked, in a chair wedged under the handle. She cleaned her father's rifle with extra care, inspected every round of her remaining ammunition under a magnifying glass, looking for any sign of tampering. Everything appeared normal. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring day 3, a storm, conditions that would test every shooter's limits. But Grace had been training for storms her entire life. She lay back on her bunk, stared at her father's photograph, young and strong and certain, ready to face whatever came. They're trying to break me, Dad, she whispered. But you taught me that the only person who can break you is yourself. Everyone else can only create obstacles. And warriors don't avoid obstacles, they overcome them. Sleep came easier than expected. The sleep of someone who knew exactly who they were and what they had to do. Day 3 arrived with a vengeance that reminded Grace why California weather could turn from paradise to purgatory without warning. She woke at 03:30 to the sound of wind howling against the barracks like something alive and angry. Through her window, she could see palm trees bending at impossible angles, their fronds whipping frantically in gusts that would make precision shooting nearly impossible. Rain didn't fall, it attacked, driven horizontally by winds that the weather station would later clock at 32 miles per hour, with gusts exceeding 40. Any reasonable person would have canceled today's competition, but Master Chief Jack Reeves wasn't a reasonable person. He was a warrior who'd survived Hue City and Quezon, who'd learned that combat didn't wait for perfect conditions, that the enemy didn't care if you were ready. By 600, 15 competitors stood on the coastal firing range in full rain gear that was already soaked through. The range had been relocated overnight to a clifftop position overlooking the Pacific, where wind patterns were notoriously unpredictable. Eddies and gusts and sudden calms created by the interaction of ocean air and landmass. Invisible rivers of force that could push bullets off course by feet instead of inches. Grace could taste salt on her lips, feel the wind trying to physically push her off balance. This was nature at its most hostile, conditions that separated warriors from shooters. Day 3. Reeves's voice somehow boomed over the storm, cutting through wind and rain with the force of absolute authority. Today is about adaptation. Combat doesn't wait for perfect weather. Your enemy doesn't care if conditions are ideal. He attacks when he has advantage, when conditions favor him and hurt you. Today you prove you can perform when everything is against you. He gestured toward the targets, barely visible through rain and mist that turned the world into shades of gray. Distances from 600 to 1,200 yards, 5 targets total, variable wind conditions that will change not just between shots, but during flight time. Your equipment will be tested. Your skills will be tested. Most importantly, your mind will be tested. Your ability to adapt and overcome when every advantage has been stripped away. Grace glanced down the line at her competition. Several shooters were already struggling before the competition even began. Rain hammered their advanced optics, creating condensation inside supposedly sealed scopes. Water droplets on external lenses distorted sight pictures, fogging that wouldn't clear no matter how much they wiped. Lieutenant Mitchell's expensive ballistic computer flickered and died as Grace watched. Moisture had penetrated the waterproof casing. $15,000 of technology reduced to useless weight by water that didn't care about specifications or warranties or the engineer's promises. Commander Patterson stood stoic, his SR-25 wrapped in a waterproof rain cover, his expression unreadable, but Grace could see tension in his shoulders. Even the best equipment struggled in conditions like these. Lieutenant Chen looked frustrated, constantly adjusting his Night Force scope as water droplets created optical aberrations, refraction patterns that turned precision instruments into liability. And then there was Grace, standing in the deluge with her father's M14 and its simple iron sights. No electronics to short-circuit, no glass to fog, no batteries to fail in the moisture, no computers to crash when water found microscopic gaps in seals. Just steel and wood and fundamentals. The same tools warriors had used for generations before technology promised to make them obsolete. Due to weather conditions, Reeves announced over the howling wind, anyone who wishes to withdraw can do so without penalty to their overall standing. Your Day 3 score will be recorded as your average from Days 1 and 2. 2 competitors immediately stepped forward, an Army Ranger and an Air Force sniper, both experienced warriors who recognized when conditions exceeded equipment capabilities. There was no shame in their decision, just pragmatism, understanding that some battles couldn't be won with the tools available. 13 remained. Shooters will engage in alphabetical order, Reeves continued. Lieutenant Briggs, you're first. Briggs was a SEAL with 3 combat deployments and a reputation for cold precision. His rifle was state-of-the-art. Yesterday, it would have given him every advantage. Today, it was betraying him with every shot. Through the spotting scope in the observation bunker, Grace watched his first shot go wide by several feet. The ballistic computer, struggling to calculate wind values that changed every second, had given him catastrophically bad data. His second shot was closer, but still missed the target completely at 800 yards. By his fifth shot, struggling with electronics that kept crashing and restarting, he'd scored only 2 hits out of 5 possible. He stood from the line, clearly frustrated, walked away shaking his head. A professional warrior defeated not by lack of skill, but by equipment that couldn't handle the conditions. The storm was winning. Second shooter managed 3 hits. Third shooter, 1 hit. The Tempest was systematically stripping away technology's advantages, revealing the difference between warriors who could adapt and those who depended on tools that had failed them. "Captain Thornton, you're up." Grace moved to the line, her M14 slick with rain but functioning perfectly. Every component made of materials that didn't care about water. Wood that had swollen slightly with moisture but remained stable. Steel that was wet but unaffected. Mechanisms that worked through simple physics that rain couldn't change. She assumed prone position, feeling cold water soak immediately through her uniform. The discomfort didn't matter. Pain was temporary. Performance was permanent. That's what her father had taught her in Montana winters, when fingers went numb and breath froze in the air. Through her iron sights, she could barely see the first target at 600 yards through the rain and mist. The world had turned into gradations of gray, shapes more imagined than seen. But visibility wasn't everything. Sometimes it was barely anything. Grace closed her eyes, felt the wind against her face, against her hands, against every exposed part of her body. It came from the west, hard and steady with the weight of ocean behind it, with a slight upward component as air hit the cliff face and was forced higher, creating thermal currents that would push bullets up and sideways in ways that no ballistic computer could accurately predict. Her father's voice echoed in memory, a lesson taught on a foggy morning in Montana when she was 14 years old, when he'd taken her hunting in conditions that made seeing impossible. When you can't see, you feel. The wind talks to you if you listen. The air has weight, it has texture, it has personality that changes moment to moment. Trust your senses. They're older than technology, older than civilization. Your ancestors hunted in darkness and fog for thousands of years before the first rifle was invented. Grace opened her eyes, made calculations based on feel more than formulas. Wind 40 miles per hour from 270 degrees. At 600 yards, that meant she didn't calculate exact numbers. She felt it. The bullet would drift massively right without compensation. She aimed 3 feet left of the target, so far off that to anyone watching, it looked like she was aiming at nothing, like she'd given up, like the pressure had finally broken her. She fired. 600 yards downrange, the bullet curved through the storm in a parabolic arc that looked impossible. Physics in ballistics, in wind resistance, all combining in ways that required more faith than calculation. The round punched dead center into the silhouette. The range officer's voice carried genuine surprise. "Hit! Center mass!" Even the observation bunker had gone quiet. Grace could feel their eyes on her, trying to understand what they just witnessed. Grace chambered her second round with mechanical precision. The second target was at 800 yards. The wind had shifted. She could feel the change, not see it, not calculate it from flags that were being torn apart by the gusts, but feel it on her skin, in her bones. Northwest now, stronger, maybe 45 miles per hour, with the upward component even more pronounced as the storm intensified. She adjusted her point of aim even further left and higher, compensating for wind and thermal that would push her bullet off course, trusting feel over formulas. Hit. The sensor confirmed what her body already knew. The shot had been perfect. Third target, 1,000 yards. The rain intensified into a gray wall that made seeing impossible. Vision became irrelevant. Grace waited, breathing slowly, feeling for a lull in the wind, a momentary calm in the chaos. There, perhaps 2 seconds, a brief window when the storm seemed to take a breath, when the horizontal rain eased slightly and the wind dropped from 45 to maybe 30 miles per hour. She fired immediately, trusting instinct over thought. Hit. Fourth target. 1,200 yards. 3/4 of a mile through Pacific storm. The maximum effective range of her rifle, even in perfect conditions. In this tempest, it should have been impossible. Grace's calculations became pure instinct. Years of training and thousands of rounds fired, compressed into split-second decisions that bypassed conscious thought entirely. Lead left. Compensate up and right. Fire during the microsecond pause between gusts when the wind allows it. The M14 roared, recoil solid against her shoulder. Hit. Fifth and final target. 900 yards, but positioned at an angle that created complex wind patterns. Currents swirling around the observation buildings. Eddies formed by terrain features creating chaos that even the most sophisticated computers would struggle to model accurately. Grace studied it for 10 full seconds. Precious time that ate into her window. But she was reading information that couldn't be rushed. Watching how the rain fell. How the mist moved at different elevations. Understanding that wind wasn't one thing. It was layers. Streams at different altitudes and velocities. Rivers of force flowing over and around obstacles in ways that created pockets of calm and zones of violence. She aimed what seemed like 5 feet from the target, so far off course that several observers thought she'd made a catastrophic error, that the pressure had finally overwhelmed her judgment. Grace squeezed the trigger one final time. The bullet curved through space and storm, following a path that looked impossible, but was actually inevitable. Physics expressed through skill earned over decades of discipline. Hit. 5 for 5. Perfect score for Captain Thornton in storm conditions. The competitors watching from the observation bunker fell silent. Even Mitchell, who'd been skeptical and hostile from the beginning, stood with his mouth slightly open, staring at the target verification display like it showed something that violated the fundamental laws of nature. Commander Patterson had been preparing for his own run, checking his equipment, reviewing his notes, but he stopped, set down his rifle, walked to the edge of the bunker where he could see Grace emerging from the shooting position through the rain. Water dripped from her uniform, streamed down her face. Her hair was plastered to her head, but her expression showed only calm focus, like she just completed a routine training exercise instead of something that would be discussed in sniper schools for decades. Patterson approached as she entered the bunker, dripping and cold. "That was supernatural, Captain." He paused, searching for words adequate to capture what he'd witnessed. "You couldn't even see the targets clearly. How did you do that?" Grace wrung water from her sleeves, her voice matter-of-fact, like she was explaining basic mathematics instead of performing what most shooters would consider magic. Sometimes you don't need to see everything. You just need to feel what matters. Wind isn't invisible. It has weight, temperature, patterns. If you pay attention, if you've trained yourself to read the information that's always there. Your father taught you that. It wasn't a question. In the mountains of Montana, he'd take me hunting in fog so thick you couldn't see 10 feet, in snow that came sideways, in conditions where technology was useless and instinct was everything. He said it would make me a better shooter when conditions were clear. That training and hardship makes performance in normal conditions feel easy. Patterson shook his head slowly, a mixture of admiration and something close to awe. "I've got a computer that cost taxpayers $15,000. It has algorithms developed by MIT engineers, processing power that can perform millions of calculations per second. And it can't tell me what the wind is doing because the conditions change faster than it can adapt. You're doing it by feel, by instinct, by skills that don't require batteries or processors." Computers are great tools, sir, until they're not. When they fail, you need to know the fundamentals. Otherwise, you're just carrying expensive weight that can't help you. The competition continued through the morning. Patterson managed 3 hits out of 5, an impressive performance given the conditions. His experience and adaptability allowing him to overcome some of his equipment's limitations. But nowhere near Grace's perfection. Chen struggled with fogged optics, condensation that wouldn't clear, creating refraction patterns that made accurate aiming impossible. He scored only 2 hits. A professional warrior brought low by technology that promised advantages, but delivered vulnerability. Mitchell's dead computer left him essentially shooting blind. He attempted all 5 shots, but couldn't compensate for wind he couldn't measure. Scored 0 hits. Stood from the line looking like he'd been personally betrayed by the rifle that had cost more than a new car. The remaining shooters fared even worse. Some couldn't see their targets at all through rain-soaked optics. Others fired hoping their computers would somehow pull miracles from chaos. Technology that was supposed to give them advantages had become liability in conditions that didn't care about engineering promises. By noon, when Reeves finally called a halt to the competition as the storm reached truly dangerous levels, the standings had shifted dramatically. First place, Captain Grace Thornton. Perfect score in impossible conditions, leading by a margin that seemed insurmountable. Second place, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Patterson. Professional performance despite equipment limitations. Third place, Lieutenant David Chen. Solid shooting hampered by technology failures. Fourth place, tied. Multiple competitors including Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, struggling to adapt when their tools failed them. As competitors filed out of the observation bunker toward vehicles that would take them back to dry buildings, several approached Grace. Their skepticism had evaporated like steam, replaced by something that looked like respect, even reverence. Captain Anderson, the Army Ranger who'd been polite but doubtful from the beginning, extended his hand, his grip firm and genuine. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology, a serious one. I didn't think you belonged here, thought this was political correctness compromising excellence. I was completely wrong. That shooting was beyond anything I've ever witnessed. You didn't just compete with us, you dominated in conditions that defeated everyone else. I'm honored to have watched you work." "No apology necessary, Captain. You just didn't know what I was capable of. Now you do." Others followed with similar acknowledgments, quiet nods, requests to learn techniques. The tide had turned completely. Grace was no longer the outsider being tested. She was the standard, the competitor everyone else was chasing, the embodiment of something they'd forgotten in their rush to embrace technology. But not everyone was pleased. Lieutenant Mitchell stormed past without a word, his face dark with anger that went beyond professional frustration. This was personal now. His expensive equipment had failed. His assumptions about technology's superiority had been shattered. And a woman shooting a Vietnam-era rifle with iron sights had beaten him decisively. And watching from the command post through rain-streaked windows, Commander William Stryker scowled at the scoreboard. His arms crossed, his expression showing fury that transcended competition. This wasn't about scores anymore. It was about worldviews being challenged, about beliefs being proven wrong, about everything he'd built his career on crumbling like wet sand. Patterson noticed Stryker's expression, moved close to Grace as they walked toward the transport vehicles. "Watch out for Stryker. He's escalating. I've seen that look before. In combat, when men feel cornered, when everything they believed is being proven wrong, they get desperate, they get dangerous. I can't control what he does, sir. I can only control what I do." "I know, just be careful. Keep your equipment secure, your ammunition locked. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Before Grace could respond, Master Chief Reeves' voice boomed across the parking area. "Captain Thornton, a word, in my office, now." Grace followed Reeves through the rain. His office was warm and dry, almost shocking after hours in the storm. He gestured for her to sit, closed the door. His expression was serious. "I need to tell you something about your father. The full story. Something I should have told you earlier, but the time wasn't right." Grace sat, water still dripping from her uniform. "Sir?" Reeves pulled out a folder from his desk, opened it. Inside were photographs yellowed with age, documents, official reports. February 24th, 1968, Hue City, third week of the battle. The NVA had us pinned in the MACV compound. We'd lost all communication with higher command. Radio equipment destroyed, couldn't call for artillery support, couldn't request airstrikes. The weather was terrible, smoke from fires, rain, visibility maybe 50 meters on a good day, 20 meters most of the time. He pulled out a black and white photograph, showed it to Grace. Young Marines, dirty, exhausted, scared but determined. "That's me, 19 years old. I was a combat correspondent, not supposed to be fighting, but when the NVA attacked, everyone became infantry. We didn't have the luxury of specialization when the enemy was trying to kill us all." Reeves pulled out another document, an after-action report typed on an old typewriter. There was an NVA sniper, professional, patient, deadly. He'd positioned himself somewhere in the Citadel. We never found his exact location, never even saw muzzle flash through the smoke, but he'd been methodically eliminating us for 6 hours. 7 Marines killed that morning, 4 more wounded seriously. He was breaking our will, making us afraid to move, to evacuate casualties, to do anything but hide and wait to die. His voice took on a quality Grace had never heard before, reverence mixed with remembered terror. "Your father was positioned on the roof of the Treasury building, 400 yards from our position. He had no radio communication with us, couldn't coordinate, couldn't call for spotting information. He was operating completely independently, but through smoke and rain that made seeing nearly impossible, he was watching, analyzing, hunting, using skills that didn't require technology or communication." Reeves pulled out another document, official recommendation for Valor Award. 850 yards through visibility that made the shot seem impossible. Your father eliminated that NVA sniper with one shot, one perfect trigger press. Iron sights, no laser rangefinder, no ballistic computer, no thermal optics to see through smoke. Just skill and discipline and the fundamentals he'd mastered through years of training. Grace felt her throat tightening. But he didn't stop there. While everyone else was celebrating the sniper's death, your father had identified another threat. 11 NVA soldiers were attempting to flank our position, moving through rubble and destroyed buildings, trying to get behind us where they could finish off the entire compound with grenades and automatic weapons. Reeves's voice roughened with emotion. "Your father eliminated all 11 of them. 11 shots, 11 kills, ranges from 400 to 900 yards, through smoke so thick we couldn't see them, through rain that made accurate shooting seem impossible. He was operating on pure instinct and skill, seeing targets we couldn't see, making calculations that defied the conditions." He met Grace's eyes directly. "Your father's shooting that day saved 37 Marines. I was one of them. I was certain I was going to die in that compound, certain my mother would receive a telegram. My name would be added to a memorial wall. Your father's skill was the difference between me standing here telling you this story and being a statistic, a name, a memory that fades with time." Grace couldn't stop tears now. They mixed with rainwater on her face. "But here's what you don't know. The most important part." Reeves pulled out another document, Silver Star recommendation. "Your father was recommended for the Silver Star that day. The paperwork was submitted properly, witness statements collected from survivors, everything documented according to regulations. But during the chaos of the Tet Offensive, During the massive counteroffensive and the confusion that followed, the paperwork was lost, misfiled or destroyed in one of the attacks on administrative centers. Your father never received his medal, never got the official recognition he earned for saving 37 American lives. He closed the folder carefully, like it was precious. I've spent the last 3 years tracking down surviving witnesses from that day, finding the men who were there, collecting their statements all over again, rebuilding the documentation from memory and fragments of records that survived. Your father is finally going to receive his Silver Star. It's 56 years late, but justice delayed is not justice denied. Grace wiped tears with shaking hands. When? Award ceremony. After this competition concludes, regardless of where you place, you'll accept it on his behalf, because you've earned that honor by carrying his legacy forward, by proving that the skills he mastered still matter. Reeves stood, placed his hand on her shoulder. Tomorrow is day 4, night shooting. Your iron sights will be at severe disadvantage. The others have thermal imaging and night vision equipment worth $50,000. They can see in total darkness. Turn night into day. You'll be shooting essentially blind. But I've watched you these past 3 days. You're not just your father's daughter. You're his legacy. You're proof that warriors aren't made by their equipment. They're made by their will, their discipline, their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. I won't let you down, Master Chief. I won't let him down. You couldn't if you tried. Now get dried off, get warm, get some rest. Tomorrow night is going to test you in ways the storm didn't. That evening, Grace sat in her barracks with a chair wedged under the door handle. She'd checked every window lock, inspected every piece of equipment. Her ammunition was secured in a locked case, her rifle cleaned and maintained with extra care. She stared at her father's photograph, young and strong, ready to save 37 Marines through shooting that seemed impossible. I understand now, Dad, why you never talked about Hugh, why the Silver Star mattered so little that you never even mentioned it. Because the medal wasn't the point. The point was the 37 men who went home to their families, the 37 mothers who didn't get telegrams. That was your reward, the only one that mattered. She lay back on her bunk. Tomorrow would bring darkness, would test her with challenges that seemed designed specifically to defeat her iron sights. But she was ready, because she was her father's daughter. And he'd proven that fundamentals could overcome any obstacle. Now it was her turn to prove it again. Day 4 arrived with darkness that seemed absolute and complete. Grace woke at 0400 to prepare her equipment and her mind. But preparation for shooting in total darkness with iron sights seemed almost futile. How do you prepare for something that's essentially impossible? By 1930 hours, the sun had set over the Pacific, painting the sky in blood reds that faded to deep purple before surrendering completely to black. Full darkness descended like a curtain falling. No moon, cloud cover blocking the stars, the kind of primal darkness that city dwellers never experienced. Complete and absolute. 15 competitors, now 13 after day 3's withdrawals, stood on the night firing range watching as others checked their equipment. Thermal imaging scopes glowed with faint electronic light. Night vision devices cast eerie green illumination on the faces of men who wore them. Laser rangefinders with infrared capabilities were tested and retested, electronics humming with power. Every shooter had technology specifically designed for darkness, equipment that turned night into day. That made targets visible as clearly as noon. That gave them every possible advantage. Every shooter except Grace. Her M14 had no mounting rails for night vision, no thermal capability, no electronic aids whatsoever. In the darkness, she was as blind as any soldier from her father's generation, relying on eyes that nature had designed for daylight, not for hunting in the dark. Master Chief Reeves's voice carried across the range through speakers positioned around the course. Day 4 tests your ability to operate in denied environments. Night combat. No ambient light beyond starlight, which tonight is blocked by cloud cover. Targets at ranges from 400 to 1,200 yards. He paused to let that sink in. Maximum range in total darkness. Tonight we add complexity, hostage situations. You'll see silhouettes, some hostile, some civilian. You must identify friend from foe, engage threats, preserve innocent lives. Shoot a hostage and you're disqualified immediately. No second chances, no appeals. Hesitate too long and the scenario counts the hostage as killed by the enemy. You'll have 3 seconds per scenario to assess and engage. 8 scenarios total. Grace's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about shooting anymore. It was about judgment, about life and death decisions compressed into heartbeats, about moral calculations made when you could barely see. Captain Thornton, Reeves' voice carried careful neutrality, professional distance. You're aware your equipment lacks night vision capability. Yes, Master Chief. You're authorized to withdraw from tonight's competition without penalty. Your Day 4 score would be calculated as your average from previous days. Given your performance so far, that would still maintain your lead. Every eye turned toward her. In the darkness, Grace could feel their gazes, even if she couldn't see faces clearly. Some probably hopeful she'd quit. Others curious to see if she'd actually attempt this impossible task. Ma'am, Patterson's voice came from nearby, concerned, almost pleading. This isn't like the storm. In daylight, you could at least see the targets even if conditions were terrible. In this darkness, with iron sights, it's not just difficult, it's nearly impossible. Maybe actually impossible. Nearly impossible, Commander, not completely impossible. Even I'm going to struggle tonight, and I've got $20,000 worth of night vision equipment, computer-assisted target acquisition, thermal imaging that shows heat signatures through complete darkness. You'll be shooting blind, literally blind. Not blind, just shooting differently. Grace thought back to one of her father's final lessons before he'd gotten sick. She'd been 19, home on leave from basic training. He'd taken her to the mountains at midnight, no moon, clouds covering what few stars might have been visible. Turn off your flashlight, he'd said. Dad, I can't see anything. It's completely black. Not yet. Give your eyes time. Let them adjust. Human eyes are better than you think. We've just forgotten how to use them. We've let technology make us dependent, make us weak. They'd waited in silence for 30 minutes, her father patient and still, Grace fidgeting and frustrated. But gradually, impossibly, the darkness had revealed itself. Not as daylight, but as gradations of shadow, shapes emerging from nothing, movement becoming visible. The night wasn't pure black, it was dark gray, charcoal, hints of silver from starlight that penetrated the clouds in places. Now her father's whispered question echoed in memory across the years. Can you see? And she could. Not clearly, not perfectly, but enough. I'm shooting, Master Chief. Reeves nodded once, accepting her decision without argument. Shooters will engage in reverse order of current standings. Captain Thornton, you're last tonight. You'll shoot at approximately 2,200 hours. That gave her 2.5 hours to watch others perform, to study the scenarios, but most importantly, to let her eyes adapt to complete darkness. Grace found a position at the back of the observation area, away from any light sources. She closed her eyes for 10 full minutes, then opened them slowly, letting her pupils dilate fully, letting rod cells in her retinas adjust to darkness. Ancient mechanisms that predator species had used for millions of years before humans invented fire or tools. Patterson went first. His night vision equipment allowed him to identify and engage targets with impressive accuracy. She watched his performance on the monitors that showed thermal camera feeds of the scenarios. Professional, competent. He completed 8 scenarios successfully, missing only 2 where the lighting conditions were especially poor and targets appeared at maximum range. Chen managed 6 successful scenarios, solid performance demonstrating his skill, but he'd hesitated on 2 shots. That moment of doubt resulting in simulated hostage deaths that would have been real casualties in combat. Mitchell managed only 4 scenarios. His equipment worked perfectly, but his judgment was compromised. By anger, maybe, by the need to prove something after being embarrassed by obsolete iron sights and lost technology advantage. As each shooter performed, Grace studied everything she could, where targets appeared, patterns in their placement even though positions were supposedly random, timing sequences that might indicate computer algorithms. Most importantly, she let her eyes continue adapting. 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes of progressive darkness adaptation. Her pupils dilating fully, taking up every photon of available light, rod cells becoming hypersensitive, the ancient systems that let humans hunt at dawn and dusk, awakening fully for the first time in her modern life. "Captain Thornton, you're up." Grace walked to the firing line at 21:47 hours. Her M14 felt heavier than usual. Or perhaps that was just the weight of impossibility pressing down on her shoulders. She assumed her position, loaded her rifle, waited for the first scenario. The range lights that had been providing minimal ambient illumination died completely. Absolute darkness descended, the kind of darkness that made you question if your eyes were even open. Grace closed her eyes for 10 full seconds, then opened them slowly. The world wasn't black anymore. It was deep gray with hints of definition. She could see the outline of the scenario area, the vague shapes of building facades used for the hostage situations, the rectangular frames where targets would appear. Scenario 1, the range officer's voice announced from speakers. 3 silhouettes at 600 yards, 2 hostile, 1 civilian. Identify and engage. Time starts now. 3 shapes materialized in the darkness, barely visible, more suggestion than substance, like shapes seen through fog or heavy smoke. Grace's mind processed information at lightning speed that felt slower than heartbeats. The leftmost shape held something angular, a rifle judging by the projection, the way it caught what minimal light existed. Center shape had hands raised, no weapon visible. Defensive posture. Rightmost shape had weapons shouldered. Aggressive stance. Ready to fire. Left target first. It was turning to aim at something. Maybe her. Maybe the civilian. Grace aligned her iron sights using muscle memory more than vision. Leading slightly for the target's movement, she couldn't see her sights clearly, could barely see the target, but she knew where everything was. Felt it more than saw it. She fired. Hit confirmed by the electronic sensor. Green light barely visible in the darkness. Right target immediately. Before it could engage the hostage. Before it could fire on her. She shifted aim. Fired. Hit. 2 seconds had elapsed. The hostage remained standing. Unharmed. Scenario 1 complete. No casualties. Grace allowed herself 1 slow breath before the next scenario loaded. Scenario 2 appeared at 800 yards. Even darker area. 4 silhouettes this time. 3 civilians, 1 hostile. The hostile was crouched behind a civilian, using the innocent as a shield. Grace waited, watching for movement, for any indication of position or intent. Patterns that would reveal who was a threat. The hostile shifted slightly, exposing his shoulder and head for a fraction of a second. A sliver of vulnerability that required perfect timing and perfect aim. She fired into that narrow space. Hit. Hostage unharmed. Scenario 3. 5 silhouettes at 1,000 yards. Grace could barely see them as anything more than dark spots against slightly lighter background. Movement. Shapes. But no details. No way to identify weapons or postures clearly. She watched for 2 full seconds. Burning time, but gathering information. Seeing patterns in how shapes moved. How they related to each other spatially. building a mental picture from fragments. 2 hostiles, 3 civilians. She identified targets. Engaged. 2 shots, 2 hits. Civilians safe. By scenario 7, Grace had entered a state beyond conscious thought. Her shooting had become pure instinct. Eyes processing the minimal light available. Mind calculating angles and distances. Hands moving the rifle before her brain fully registered the decisions being made. She was operating on a level that transcended technique or technology, accessing something primal and perfect. The same state her father had achieved at Hue City when conscious thought would have been too slow, when instinct was the only thing fast enough to save lives. Scenario 8. The range officer's voice carried unusual gravity. Target at 1,200 yards, hostage situation, low light conditions, partial obstruction. Time starts now. Grace strained her eyes into the darkness. 1,200 yards, nearly 3/4 of a mile in near total darkness. She could barely see the scenario area, just the faintest suggestion of vertical shapes against slightly lighter background. Then she saw it. Movement. The smallest shift in shadow density. A hostile silhouette behind a hostage. Position so any shot risked hitting the innocent. Standard tactics. Coward's tactics, but effective. Her father's voice echoed in memory. A lesson that went beyond technique or mechanics, beyond anything that could be taught in a classroom. Sometimes you don't shoot what you see, you shoot what you know is there. Trust the fundamentals, trust your training, trust that if you do everything right, the bullet will go where it needs to go, even if you can't see it. Grace couldn't see the target clearly enough to aim conventionally, but she'd watched 8 other shooters attempt this scenario. She knew where the hostile had to be positioned based on the scenario's geometry. She understood the angles, the spacing, the mathematical certainty of where a threat would stand to use a hostage as shield most effectively. She aimed at empty darkness, trusting mathematics over vision, trusting training over sight, trusting fundamentals that had kept warriors alive for millennia before night vision and thermal imaging. She fired into blackness. For 3 heartbeats, silence. The kind of silence that preceded either vindication or catastrophic failure. Then the sensor light illuminated. Green, confirming the impossible. Hit confirmed. Hostage secure. Scenario 8 complete. The range erupted. Even competitors who'd been skeptical all week were standing now, voices raised in disbelief and admiration, staring at the darkness where Grace had just accomplished something that shouldn't have been possible. That violated every assumption about what human capability could achieve without technology. That proved fundamentals could overcome any obstacle if mastered deeply enough. Grace stood, cleared her weapon, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She just shot a target she couldn't see, at a distance that required faith more than skill, and succeeded. Patterson was the first to reach her as she entered the observation bunker, his expression showing something between admiration and disbelief. "That last shot, Grace," he paused, struggled to find words. "You couldn't even see the target. How?" "I didn't need to see it, sir. I knew where it had to be. Mathematics, geometry, understanding that some truths exist whether you can see them or not." Master Chief Reeves's voice boomed across the range with something that sounded almost like pride. "Perfect score, 8 scenarios, 8 successful completions, 0 hostage casualties. Captain Thornton extends her lead with performance that will be studied and discussed for generations." The scoreboard updated in the observation bunker. First place, Captain Grace Thornton, leading by a margin that now seemed absolutely insurmountable. Second place, Commander Daniel Patterson, professional performance but unable to match Grace's perfection. Third place, Lieutenant David Chen, falling further behind but still competitive for bronze. Fourth place, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, equipment failures and judgment errors dropping him out of medal contention. As competitors dispersed into the night, Reeves approached Grace privately, his weathered face showing rare satisfaction, maybe even joy. Tomorrow is the final day. Live fire urban combat simulation. Most complex scenario we've ever designed. Multiple threats. Split-second decisions under maximum stress. The culmination of everything we've tested this week. I'll be ready, Master Chief. I know you will. Reeves paused, then added quietly, Commander Stryker submitted a formal complaint tonight, claims your performance is statistically impossible without technological aid. He's demanding a comprehensive equipment inspection, suggesting you're using hidden electronics, night vision contacts, something he can't see, but that explains what his worldview can't accept. Grace's jaw tightened. Let him inspect everything I own, sir. He won't find anything because there's nothing to find. I told him the same thing. But watch your back tomorrow. This is his last chance to stop you. And a man who feels his entire belief system collapsing does desperate things. Dangerous things. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was the final day. The last test. After that, the competition would be over. Her father would receive his silver star, and she would have proven that fundamentals still mattered. But something felt wrong, a nagging sense that the worst was yet to come. She got up, checked her equipment for the 10th time. Her ammunition was secured. Her rifle was locked. Everything was as it should be, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Day 5 arrived with Grace's hands trembling from a discovery she'd made at 0300 hours. In the pre-dawn darkness, alone in her barracks, she'd inspected her ammunition for the final competition and found that nearly half the cartridges had been tampered with, damaged casings showing tool marks, improperly seated primers that would cause misfires, powder loads that felt wrong when she weighed them carefully, some too light, some too heavy, creating dangerous pressure variations that could jam her rifle or even cause catastrophic failure. Someone had replaced her carefully prepared rounds with sabotaged ammunition that could misfire, jam her rifle at a critical moment, even cause a barrel obstruction that might injure her or those nearby. This wasn't just competition sabotage anymore. This was potentially life-threatening. She'd reported it immediately to Master Chief Reeves, waking him at 0315 with a phone call. He'd arrived at her barracks within 5 minutes, examined the evidence, launched an investigation, and provided her with fresh ammunition from the armory's most secured stock. But time had been against her. Barely enough time to inspect the new rounds, verify they were safe, no time to practice with them, no time to verify they matched her rifle's unique characteristics. Every weapon had its preferences, its personality. Ammunition that worked perfectly in one rifle might group differently in another. And now at 0600, standing in the staging area for the final challenge, Grace's hands still shook slightly from adrenaline and anger. Day 5, Reeves's voice boomed across the range. Final competition, live fire urban combat simulation. You'll navigate a mock city environment with multiple buildings, civilians, hostiles, high-value targets, everything designed to test what you've learned this week. He gestured toward the elaborate training facility, a small city constructed from shipping containers and plywood, buildings with multiple floors, alleyways, elevated positions, danger areas, a maze designed to simulate hostile territory. Scenarios include close-quarters battle, long-range precision shots, moral judgment calls, equipment failures. He paused on those last words, looking directly at Grace. Unexpected threats. Time pressure. Everything designed to test not just your shooting, but your judgment under maximum stress. Reeves continued. Course completion time is 60 minutes maximum. Fail to complete within that window, and you're disqualified. Shoot a civilian anywhere in the course, immediate disqualification. Fail to eliminate a high-value target, major point deduction. This tests everything: shooting, tactics, judgment, adaptability, mental toughness. His eyes found Grace's across the assembled competitors. Due to sabotage discovered this morning involving tampering with Captain Thornton's ammunition, she's been provided fresh rounds from secured stock. I'm stating this publicly so everyone understands. Someone in this competition or supporting this competition has crossed a line from competitive advantage to criminal action. That person will be found and prosecuted to the fullest extent of military and civilian law. Every competitor turned to stare. Sabotage, criminal action. The words hung in the air like an accusation looking for a target. Negative, Master Chief. I'm completing the course. A nod. Alphabetical order. Captain Anderson first, Lieutenant Chen second, Captain Thornton third. Grace watched the first two shooters carefully. Anderson completed 6 of 10 scenarios successfully. Professional performance, but nothing exceptional. Chen managed 7 completions, but had hesitated on a critical hostage rescue. The simulated civilian had died. He exited the course, visibly shaken. A warrior defeated not by lack of skill, but by hesitation at a critical moment. Captain Thornton, you're up. Grace stepped to the entry point. Her M14 loaded with the replacement ammunition, her heart rate controlled through breathing techniques, her mind clear and focused despite the sabotage, despite the danger, despite everything working against her. The buzzer sounded. She entered the urban maze. Immediately her training took over. Movement techniques learned at Quantico and refined through years of practice. She moved along walls, using cover, rifle at ready position, scanning for threats, creating angles that gave her advantage, clearing corners with precision that had become unconscious. The first scenario appeared without warning. 2 hostiles at 40 yards in a simulated market area. Civilians scattered throughout, running, panicking, creating chaos and confusion. Grace identified the threats instantly, distinguished them from innocents by their weapons, by their postures, by the aggressive intent written in their body language. 2 shots, center mass. 2 hostiles down, civilians unharmed. She moved forward, clearing the area, checking for additional threats. The discipline of never assuming the obvious was everything. The second scenario was more complex. A building interior, multiple rooms, various distances, threats that could appear anywhere. Grace cleared each room with precision, using techniques that had been drilled into her until they became reflex. Close quarters shooting at 10 yards in a hallway, tight space, no room for error, 1 shot, hostile down. Then a sudden long-range target appearing at a window 300 yards distant, visible for maybe 2 seconds. Grace dropped to one knee, acquired the target through her iron sights, calculated the minimal drop at that range, fired, hit. Scenario 3, rooftop sniper at 800 yards, partially concealed behind concrete barriers. The target was barely visible, just a sliver of silhouette showing, the kind of shot that required perfect wind reading and perfect execution. Grace calculated the angle, the slight breeze coming off the Pacific, the morning sun just starting to warm the air and create subtle thermal currents. Adjusted for everything her training had taught her, squeezed the trigger, the target dropped. Then at scenario 4, disaster struck exactly as someone had planned. Grace chambered a new round and felt the bolt resist. Sluggish. Not quite right. She pulled the trigger on a hostile threat at 200 yards. The rifle jammed. The cartridge had failed to seat properly, stopping halfway into the chamber. One of the replacement rounds, some microscopic defect that turned reliable ammunition into liability at the worst possible moment, exactly when she was most vulnerable. Time didn't stop for malfunctions. The threat remained active. Simulated civilians were in danger. The scenario clock was running. Every second of delay counted against her. Grace's hands moved with practiced speed that looked superhuman, but was actually the result of 10,000 repetitions. Muscle memory taking over when conscious thought would be too slow. 28 seconds to clear a Type 2 malfunction. 28 seconds that felt like hours, but was actually lightning fast by any standard. Pull charging handle. Lock bolt to rear. Strip magazine. Inspect chamber. A mangled cartridge was stuck in the throat. She used her cleaning rod section from her tactical vest to drive it out. Inspected the chamber for damage. None visible. The rifle was still functional. Reloaded with a fresh magazine. Chambered a new round. Reacquired the target that had been waiting patiently like this was real combat. 28 seconds. Most shooters would have panicked, failed, given up under the pressure. Grace fired. Hit. She continued through the course, her confidence growing with each completed scenario. The damaged ammunition had cost her precious time, but she adapted, checked each round before chambering it, discarded 2 more suspicious cartridges, shot with what remained, trusted her training over the equipment that had been sabotaged. Scenario 7 was the ultimate technical challenge. 3 hostage takers at 1,000 yards, positioned in different windows of a 3-story building. Obscured positions. Low contrast against the building's dark interior, and the hostages were clearly visible, making any error potentially lethal to innocents. Grace found a shooting position that gave her optimal angle. Through her iron sights, the targets were barely distinguishable from shadows. But she'd spent 4 days learning to shoot what she could barely see, trusting instinct and mathematics over visual confirmation. First target, left window, 2nd floor. She aimed, compensated for distance and elevation. The slight breeze that would push her bullet right. Fired. Hit. Second target, right window, 3rd floor. Higher elevation. Slightly different wind exposure due to building effects. Adjust. Fire. Hit. 3rd target, center window, 1st floor, the most obscured position. The hostage was directly in front of the threat. No room for error. 1 inch wrong and an innocent died. Grace waited, watching for movement, patient, disciplined. The kind of patience that separated snipers from mere shooters. There, the hostile shifted slightly, exposing a narrow angle of vulnerability, maybe 6 inches of target. A shot that required absolute precision at 1,000 yards with iron sights through morning haze. She fired into that impossibly small space. Hit. Hostage safe. The final 3 scenarios tested judgment more than marksmanship. Ambiguous situations where threats weren't clearly defined. Split-second decisions that meant the difference between saving lives and taking innocent ones. The kind of moral calculations that warriors carried forever. A figure with a weapon, but was it pointed at her threateningly or being surrendered? Grace held fire for 1 crucial second, saw the weapon lower, hands go up in surrender, moved past without engaging. Correct. It was a civilian who'd picked up a fallen weapon in panic. Shooting would have been murder. 2 figures struggling in close combat, 1 hostile, 1 friendly, impossible to distinguish in the chaos of close quarters. Grace couldn't risk the shot from this angle. She moved quickly to a better position, flanking, creating an angle where she could identify the threat by tactical gear, eliminated him with 1 shot without harming the civilian he'd been attacking. The final scenario was deceptively simple. A single hostile at 600 yards. Exposed position, clear shot, easy by any standard, the kind of shot she could make in her sleep. But something felt wrong. Grace's instincts screamed warning. Years of training that taught her to question the obvious, to look for the trap in what seemed straightforward. She studied the situation for several seconds, burning time, but gathering information. There, a wire, barely visible against the ground, running from the hostile's position to a nearby building where civilians sheltered. A trap. Shooting the hostile would trigger an explosive device that would kill innocents. The scenario was testing whether she would think before shooting, whether she had the discipline to see beyond the obvious target. Grace redirected her aim to the wire itself. A target barely thicker than a pencil at 600 yards. The kind of shot that existed in theory, but rarely in practice. The kind of shot that required perfection. Her father's voice whispered in memory one final time. Sometimes the hardest shot is the one that saves lives without taking one. Grace's breath stilled. Her heart slowed through conscious control. The world narrowed to that single, thin line stretched across space. Barely visible, impossibly small. But there, she fired. The wire severed, sparking as the bullet cut through metal. The trap neutralized, civilians saved. Then she eliminated the hostile with her next shot. One kill, but more importantly, multiple lives saved. The exit buzzer sounded. Grace emerged from the urban environment, her uniform soaked with sweat despite the cool morning. Her rifle's barrel still warm from firing, but her face showed calm focus, like she just completed routine training instead of something that would become legendary. Master Chief Reeves stood at the exit with stopwatch and tablet, his expression unreadable until she got close. Time, 42 minutes, 16 seconds. Scenarios completed, 10 of 10. Civilian casualties, 0. High-value targets eliminated, all confirmed. Equipment malfunction overcome in 28 seconds. Reeves looked up from his tablet, met Grace's eyes. Perfect score, Captain Thornton, despite criminal sabotage designed to make you fail. You've just completed the most difficult combat simulation in naval special warfare history without a single error. The assembled competitors fell silent. Then Patterson started a slow clap that others gradually joined. Even Chen, who'd lost to her consistently, nodded with grudging respect and genuine admiration. But Grace barely heard the applause. Her eyes were fixed on Commander William Stryker, who stood at the back of the group, his face twisted with barely contained rage. He tried to sabotage her, tried to make her fail, tried to prove she didn't belong. And she'd beaten his sabotage along with everything else, proven that fundamentals could overcome even deliberate attempts to destroy them. Reeves's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Commander Stryker, report to my office immediately. Military police are waiting with evidence, security footage, fingerprint analysis. You're under arrest for multiple violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice and civilian criminal statutes. Stryker's face went pale, the rage draining away like water from a broken dam, leaving only shock and the realization that his career was over, ended by his own actions. As military police approached to take him into custody, Grace's voice stopped them, stopped everyone. Commander Stryker. Stryker turned, his eyes showing something that might have been shame or defiance, or both mixed together. I'm sorry about your son, sir. Master Chief Reeves told me. Iraq, 2006. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Stryker's face cracked, the rage and defiance evaporating, leaving only grief that had twisted into something toxic. I thought, if I could prove the old ways don't work, if I could show that lowering standards kills warriors, maybe it would make sense why Brian died. Maybe it would mean something. Grace stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm, full of compassion but also truth. The old ways didn't fail your son, sir. Bad leadership did. Training shortcuts did. Political decisions made by people who never served. But not fundamentals, not discipline, not the values that make warriors. She paused. Let's honor him by fixing that, by teaching the next generation that excellence has no shortcuts, that fundamentals matter more than politics or quotas or anything else, that warriors are made by their will, not their equipment. Stryker's eyes glistened with tears. He nodded once, unable to speak. Then the MPs led him away, a tragic figure destroyed by grief that had been allowed to become rage, by loss that had never been properly healed. That afternoon, Master Chief Reeves gathered all remaining competitors for final standings and announcements. This has been the most challenging competition in Naval Special Warfare Command history. You've been tested in ways that revealed not just your skills, but your character, your adaptability, your ability to perform when every advantage is stripped away. He looked at the assembled warriors with genuine pride. But this year, something extraordinary happened. We witnessed a warrior prove that fundamentals outlast fashion, that discipline defeats dependency, that the person makes the weapon deadly, not the other way around. Reeves pulled out the final scoreboard. Third place with consistently strong performance across all 5 days. Lieutenant David Chen, United States Marine Corps. Chen stepped forward, accepted his award with professional grace. Second place demonstrating tactical excellence and consistent high-level performance under impossible conditions. Commander Daniel Patterson, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Command. Patterson stood, shook Reeves's hand, then turned and caught Grace's eye. Smiled with genuine friendship and respect. No resentment, just admiration. And first place, Reeves's voice grew stronger, won by a margin that removes all doubt. Perfect scores on days 1, 3, 4, and 5. Leading performance on day 2. All of this despite equipment sabotage, denied practice time, stolen ammunition, and criminal attempts to force failure. Grace stood, her heart pounding. The first woman to not only compete in, but completely dominate the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Sniper Competition. Captain Grace Thornton, United States Marine Corps. The assembly erupted. Not polite applause, thunderous recognition from warriors who understood exactly what she'd accomplished, what she'd overcome, what she'd proven. Grace walked to the platform, saluted Master Chief Reeves, accepted the trophy, bronze statue of a sniper in prone position. Outstanding performance, Captain. You've made history this week, changed minds, proven truths that some had forgotten. Thank you, sir. I was honoring what my father taught me, that actions speak louder than words, that excuses don't matter, only results. But Reeves wasn't finished. He stepped forward, carrying something Grace hadn't expected. A folded American flag and a small wooden case. Captain Thornton, there's one more ceremony, one more honor that's 56 years overdue. He opened the case. Inside, gleaming against blue velvet, lay a Silver Star medal. Your father, Colonel James Thornton, served with extraordinary distinction during the Tet Offensive, February 24th, 1968, Hue City, Republic of Vietnam. Grace's breath caught. The entire assembly went silent. North Vietnamese Army sniper had pinned down American forces, killing Marines methodically, breaking their will. Your father, positioned 400 yards away through smoke and rain, eliminated that sniper at 850 yards. One shot, iron sights, perfect execution under impossible conditions. Reeves's voice grew thick with emotion. Then he identified 11 more enemy soldiers attempting to flank American positions. Eliminated all of them, ranges from 400 to 900 yards, through visibility that made shooting nearly impossible. Saved 37 American lives that day. He paused. Let the weight of that number sink in. I was one of those 37 Marines. Your father's skill was the difference between me standing here and being a name on a memorial wall. Reeves's voice broke slightly, the first time Grace had seen him lose composure. Your father was recommended for the Silver Star, but paperwork was lost during the chaos. He never received his medal, never got the recognition he earned. On behalf of the United States Marine Corps and a grateful nation, it is my honor to present your father's Silver Star. 56 years late, but no less deserved. And it is my privilege to place it in the hands of his daughter, who has proven that his legacy of excellence continues, that his teachings still produce warriors, that fundamentals still matter. Tears streamed down Grace's face as Reeves pinned the medal to the flag, placed both in her hands. The weight of it, not physical, but emotional, nearly buckled her knees. He taught you well, Grace. You shot exactly the same way he did, with instinct, with heart, with fundamentals that outlast technology. And like him, you proved that warriors aren't made by their equipment. They're made by their will, their discipline, their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. The applause that followed was different, deeper, more reverent. These warriors understood they were witnessing something beyond competition results. This was legacy, honor, history, justice delayed but finally delivered. As Grace returned to her seat, carefully cradling her father's flag and medal, one more announcement came. Captain Thornton, Naval Special Warfare Command would like to offer you a position as Senior Sniper Instructor. You would be the first woman to hold this position. Respond for training the next generation of military marksmen across all service branches, teaching them the fundamentals you've mastered, showing them that technology is a tool, not a replacement for skill. Grace stood again, her voice steady despite her tears. I accept, sir, with honor and with gratitude for the opportunity to pass forward what my father taught me. The ceremony concluded, but the real moment came afterward, when the SEALs who doubted her on day one approached individually. Petty Officer Davis, the young SEAL she'd outshot consistently. Ma'am, would you consider being my primary instructor? I want to learn to shoot like you do, without depending on electronics that can fail, with fundamentals that work regardless of conditions. I'd be honored. Others followed with similar requests. Mitchell approached last, his pride finally set aside, his anger gone, replaced by something that looked like respect and maybe even shame. You earned this, Captain, fair and square, despite everything working against you. I'd appreciate the chance to learn from you, to understand the fundamentals I've forgotten while depending on computers to do my thinking. Of course, Lieutenant, that's what instructors do. We teach, we share, we make the next generation better than we were. That evening, Patterson found Grace in the armory. She was cleaning her father's rifle one final time before the deployment. Hell of a week, Captain. Hell of a week, sir. They worked in comfortable silence, the ritual of weapons maintenance connecting all warriors across time and service. There's something else I need to tell you, Patterson said, his voice taking on a quality she hadn't heard before. Personal, vulnerable. About why I'm different from the others, why I never saw you as a threat. Grace continued cleaning, giving him space and time. I had a younger brother, Tommy. He wanted to be a Marine like our old man. Korea veteran, tough as nails, but Tommy had asthma. Disqualified medically before he even got to MEPS. Broke his heart in a way I don't think ever healed. Patterson's hands stilled on his rifle. He became a teacher instead, high school history, taught kids about the wars he couldn't fight in, the warriors he wanted to become, but couldn't. He was good at it, made history come alive for them. His voice dropped lower. He died last year. Lung cancer. Ironic given the asthma that kept him out of service might have saved him from burn pits that killed others. Before he passed, we talked about regret, about roads not taken. He told me he'd spent his whole life wondering if he had what Dad had, if he could have been a warrior if given the chance. The not knowing haunted him. Patterson met her eyes. When I watch you refuse to quit, despite sabotage, despite broken equipment, despite everyone expecting failure, I see what Tommy could have been if he'd gotten his chance. You're not just shooting for yourself, Grace. You're shooting for everyone who believes fundamentals still matter. For everyone told they don't belong who proved they do anyway. Grace felt the weight of his words, the responsibility they carried. Your brother sounds like he was a good man, sir. He was, and he'd be proud to know what you're proving. That warriors aren't defined by gender or politics. They're defined by heart, by discipline, by refusal to accept limits that others try to impose. Patterson stood, extended his hand. Joint Task Force deployment, 6 months overseas, advisory role training allied forces in fundamentals, mountain warfare, electronic denial, Areas where high-tech fails and old-school skills matter. I'm team leader. We need a senior sniper instructor. Someone who can teach what you've demonstrated this week. When do we deploy, sir? 4 weeks. Gives you time to settle into your instructor role here first. Develop training curriculum. Begin teaching the next generation. Grace shook his hand, firm, the grip of equals, of warriors who tested each other and found mutual respect. I'll be ready. 1 week later, Grace stood in her new office at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center. Her father's silver star sat on her desk beside her trophy. Tomorrow, she'd begin training her first class of students, teaching them what her father had taught her, that fundamentals outlasted fashion, that discipline defeated dependency, that warriors were made by their will, not their weapons. Her phone buzzed. Text from Patterson. Deployment briefing 1400 tomorrow. Bring your rifle. Where we're going, fundamentals matter more than technology. Old ways are new again. Grace smiled, loaded her father's M14 for tomorrow's class, for the deployment that would come, for whatever challenges lay ahead. They'd given her a broken rifle to prove she didn't belong. Instead, she'd proven that real warriors weren't defined by their equipment. They were defined by the fire inside that refused to quit, the discipline that wouldn't accept defeat, the fundamentals that outlasted every technological advantage. Her father had known that truth, had lived it in Hue City, had passed it to his daughter with the same care he'd maintained his rifle. Master Chief Reeves had known it, had survived Vietnam because of it, had spent 56 years waiting to honor the man who'd saved his life by teaching that same truth to a new generation. And now Captain Grace Thornton knew it too, knew it in her bones, in her trigger finger, in every perfectly placed shot. The old ways never died, they just waited for someone worthy to carry them forward. And Grace Thornton was ready, had always been ready, because she was her father's daughter. And warriors didn't need excuses, they just needed fundamentals.